Hey everyone, it's Carla Rieger, and today I have a really amazing guest that I know you'll love her information. Her name's Katherine Johnson, and she believes you change the world by being yourself. And she's been an executive presence expert, which is kind of cool. Everybody needs presence when they're talking to a group, when they're talking to one person, when they're talking to 5 people, when they're talking to 500, right? So she teaches speakers from around the world how to effectively amplify their presence and make a bigger difference by showing up more as the authentic version of themselves. I mean, we've all seen people up there who just, there's a bit of incongruence. And so it's hard to do that by herself. So she's, helps people do that. So she has an Ivy League education. She was a national champion athlete and success in the professional world, yet she still herself struggled to be authentically seen and recognized for all she had to offer. And I know I've struggled with that too. So I think we all do. And so this is really a topic for everyone. And this situation inspired Katherine to redefine what it means to live a purposeful life and create a business based on the truth of who she is and her core values. So Katherine developed a proven model to support speakers who both want big success and to be seen and heard and valued for who they really are. So she teaches speakers, leaders, and business owners how to step forward with an outer image that increases connection, confidence, and positions them for success. And that's so important about how people initially see you, right? So whether it's knowing what to wear professionally, in front of a camera, or when speaking to their ideal clients, Katherine revolutionizes everything you thought you knew about presence and personal style, so you can connect more easily with others and position yourself for success. So through speaking workshops and transformative one-to-one consulting, Katherine enables speakers to be seen, heard, and valued for who they truly are. And she divides herself between Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, BC. And we're here in Vancouver, BC today, my hometown. And she can be found having silly dance parties with her children, enjoying family camping trips, or running around the squash court. Oh, yeah, I used to be a big squash player too, but I know you're a champion. So she loves supporting speakers and passionate individuals who are ready to find their authentic spark. So I love this topic of presence. So Katherine, why does presence matter so much?
For speakers spend so much time really wanting to get their words right, and they have so much energy and passion for whatever that message is they want to get out in the world. And presence matters because it's all the things that you're communicating without saying any words, right? And so your energy, your body language, and your appearance matter. And this is the piece that I think sometimes gets forgotten, or unconsciously decisions are made and they actually end up sabotaging speakers or sending mixed messages that make it really confusing for their audience.
I know. I've seen that. And I think we all have, being in an audience and you look and you think something's not right and you don't quite know what it is, but you're really good at identifying what it is and getting it back in alignment, right?
Right. It's sometimes something that the audience can't put their finger on. And, most times when I'm working with speakers, they don't even know that they're doing it, because this is a piece that we're typically not taught. So we don't grow up having this information of how to really authentically communicate through the clothes you put on your body, something we do every day, something as routine as getting dressed, and what you put on your body can be really profound in creating connection and establishing credibility. And I'm not talking about, like a magazine makeover where you go from looking like you were living under a rock to being a glamour star. It's the nuances of, what does it mean to actually show up and position yourself and be open and available and create that trust and have that confidence that means other people are leaning in, because confidence is contagious, right? When you're a speaker, that energy and that confidence, it lifts people up. And there's so much opportunity to think about leading with that presence.
Right. Yeah, I was actually just talking to a client the other day about this, because she's talking to a group that's really different from her in terms of education and background. And she was like, I was up all night trying to figure out what to wear. I don't know what to wear. and I think we all have those moments, right? How are they going to see me? But in the end, really, what I think you're talking about is finding something that works with you so that you feel confident and you feel authentic.
It does. It starts with that. And I get that all the time. I had a client who called me the other day, and she's like, okay, I'm packing for a trip and I'm going to be speaking at an event. She goes, I don't know what to wear. And so as much as we want to focus on the message, the impact, the outcome of your speaking, it takes up all this mental space, right? The being unsure, right? The uncertainty takes up emotional space, mental space, and then it just takes up time because you're kind of cycling through this, I don't know.
Yeah.
What I want is for people to really be clear on what works for them and then get on with it so they can be comfortable and confident in their body.
Yeah.
And not be distracted, because we all know those speakers who they're tugging at their clothes, or something is jangling too much, or their jacket doesn't fit properly. And all of a sudden you haven't heard the last 3 sentences they've said because you're distracted by that.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I certainly have done that. I remember speaking at this event thinking it was going to be really posh. I saw pictures from last year and everybody was dressed to the nines. So I got all dressed up to the nines. Of course, wore a dress I'd never really worn. And everybody was just in like business casual golf shirts and stuff. So I'm like, it was too bad because they loved the message and it got videotaped, but the whole time I'm like, as you say, I'm like tugging and pulling and sort of trying to cover up because I felt like I was too flashy. So I put this thing over top of me and then it kept falling off, right? So
I have to tell you the story. I have a client who she's run for 10 years this leadership event in California. And when we started working together, she said, I've done this event for 8 years. And she goes, last year I had a disaster. She goes, no one really knew what was going on. She said, right before she went on stage, she runs it for 3 days. Right before she went on stage, she just didn't feel comfortable in the dress. So she threw on this big scarf, this big elaborate shawl. And she got on stage, and one of the things that happened was it kept like falling off. So she kept having to do these elaborate things with the scarf. Next thing she knew, her bracelet got stuck in the scarf. So her arm was pinned to her body. And so she said, in her mind, she's all about connection with the audience and the content. And it's here she is being totally distracted, thinking, do I let them know that I'm attached? But once they know, they won't be able to stop thinking about it or noticing it. And so eventually at some point she became unfree, but she said she just lost a whole chunk of time where it had sabotaged, right? It had completely sabotaged her to really not know what she was doing. And really she was just trying to cover up because she was uncomfortable with it, about how exposed she felt in the dress before. And it just, you can see how there's a ripple effect. And it took her out of being present and connected to what she was doing and connected with her audience.
Yeah. And I know you work a lot with men as well. And so give some examples with men. I mean, I do, but I bet you have lots.
I do. I mean, one of the things that I see for men that gets in their way is wearing clothes that fit them properly.
Right.
Fit is so critical because, again, when we get back to these underlying qualities of confidence and being comfortable with oneself, if you're not wearing clothes that appropriately follow your shape, one, it can make you seem like you don't really know who you are.
Right.
Other times I see it make men look like they're just boys dressing up in men's clothing. Right? And that's really depositioning, right? It really, when you look at someone, think of a man who a celebrity, whether it's someone who's in media or a lot of times athletes, they wear off the court clothes that are so well tailored to their bodies. And you just think, wow, it is made for them. And they just come across so polished and confident. And when you're speaking to an audience, whether it's 5 people or 500, they pick up on that and they're like, they lean into you, right? And what you're saying.
Yeah. I had one client and he said he wore this suit that was kind of like a 1940s kind of zoot suit because he liked it, but everyone talked about it. Nobody remembered his message. It was like, guy in the zoot suit.
The guy in the zoot suit, totally. And I think one of the things I want people to get is I don't want people to remember you for your clothes. If they're remembering you for your clothes, that has really outshone you as the speaker. And there's a chance it has actually distracted people from what you're saying.
Totally.
Yeah. I think if I can, this is a great time while we're talking about presence and the importance of appearance. So whether it's for men or women, you might see this little prop behind me. This is a little homemade job that I have, but it really illustrates something about presence that I'd love to share. So is this a good time?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's 3 pillars of presence. So when we're talking about presence, the overall effect of your presence is made up of 3 things. So it's gravitas, which is who you're being, and that's really your competency, your communication, so what you're saying, and then third is your appearance. So the who you're being, what you're saying, and how you look. Those are the 3 pillars of presence. Right. So this pyramid, it captures those 3, right? And what I want you to notice is they have varying percentages of how they're weighted. So gravitas, the who you're being, is the blue. That's 68% of your presence.
Right.
27%, this white section, is the communication, what you're saying. So that leaves only 5% is our appearance. And while your mind might switch over into thinking, oh, well, it's not that important, it's only 5%. Well, when you walk in front of a group and you're speaking, right, or presenting some material, you're not walking out and they're getting to see it all at the same time. You walk in front of a group and all they see is this.
Right.
So that 5% of your appearance creates the filter through which everything you say and do is evaluated. Right. So it's that first hurdle, and it can help you, right? It can help you really effectively communicate what it is that you want to get out there, or it can kind of distort your message.
Right.
Right. And so my expertise is really that 5% because it's the very first thing.
Yeah. It does make a huge difference internally and externally, as you're saying, because once you feel like you've put that time and energy into finding that congruence with yourself and you feel comfortable, as you say, it's quite powerful. People kind of underestimate. They go, oh, it's clothes, it's just surface, it's just image, but it's not. It's deep. It's a self-esteem thing. And I know you have a strong background in psychology, which really matches well with that.
Yeah, I'm surprised to be at this point in my life. If I'd looked at myself and, when I was graduating from Princeton, you would not have been tying the words image consulting and executive presence to the work I thought I'd be doing out in the world. I knew I wanted to make a huge difference in the world. The thing that got me to this point was really living a chapter in my own life that no matter the titles, the achievements, being really highly visible in the media through athletics, I might have been really well known, but the truth was no one really knew me. And it's because I used my outer presence like armor. And so the psychology of it, I didn't even know. And so when I apprenticed under a psychologist who was also an image consultant, at first I was like, well, I'm too deep for image consulting. Like, I don't want to talk about clothes all day. And so people I know who want to be known for what they contribute, for their substance, sometimes there's this thinking inside their head of, I'm too deep for this. And yet if we ignore it, it still plays a part, right? Whether we like it or not.
Yeah, I know. Years and years ago, when I first started out speaking and I was in my 20s, I thought, oh, I better get an image consultant because, clothes were never my thing. And I don't like shopping. And I know they don't like shopping or they don't have time for it. And just to go out with somebody who knew what they were doing and who could look at me and say, she'd pull something out. She'd go, this would look fantastic. I said, I would never pull that off the rack. And then I'd put it on and go, oh my gosh, that looks great. I would never think that way, and it felt great, and I wore those clothes for years. And then, of course, every few years you have to go do it again, because I know you would probably say this too, like you don't want to be wearing clothes from the 80s or the 90s, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it is like taking people on a time warp trip when you show up to speak is like not the thing that's going to help you connect. Yeah, you absolutely. And one of the mistakes I see people make, I had a client who, she was like, well, I've always done this. This has always worked for me. And I said, well, you know what got you to this point is maybe not what's going to take you to the next level. And what's really important is that you show up in a way that's really clear for who you are now in life. So that means refreshing, right? Getting up to date. And that doesn't mean trendy, but it means making sure that you're dressing for the way that your body is now, that your style reflects the person you are now. And it's honestly hardest for us to see ourselves. A lot of the times when I work with women and men, there's so many layers that we've created around our identity that really understanding how to dress ourselves so that we can be seen, it takes some help. And that's, it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, totally. I remember when I first started speaking, I was doing college events, and so we had to wear a T-shirt that had the company logo, and
yeah,
that was the look. But I remember, in order for me to survive doing that kind of work, I was often, talking to groups of guys, right? I was like 22 and they were like 18, and it was football team. And I realized if I was too feminine, they wouldn't like listen to me. I had to be really authoritative. I had to run all this male energy. And so when I left, I started doing corporate speaking. I still had this like male energy thing, and I used to dress very male. And like you're saying, Katherine, that became armor for me. And I sort of felt like I wasn't fulfilled in my work. And I didn't need to change my work. What I needed to do is become a more feminine speaker. And the first way there was through changing what I was wearing. I'm sure you've had that experience with people, right?
I absolutely have. I just was on a call with someone who was saying something that rings very true to what you were saying. And she was wanting my help because she couldn't figure out, she had someone come up to her who said, are you a police officer? Are you in law enforcement? And she was not. And she was like, no, why? And they were like, oh, you just communicate such authority. But the groups that she works with, her audience, she realized she might be pushing people away because there was nothing being communicated. She had a really great challenge the status quo, inspire her, her clients' personality and attitude. But there was nothing about her presence that created any openness or trust or spaciousness to allow people to come in, because all her energy, everything about her way of being, and then also her clothes pushed out. And so I see that a lot with the masculine, feminine energies. It comes up all the time. So sometimes those shifts of learning how to embrace all of who you are. And we do that through color. We're such visual creatures that color has a lot of power in what it communicates, but also the textures we put on our bodies, the design lines, all of these are so relevant.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And some people just have that. And some people, it takes time to learn it.
It does. It's like learning a language. Right. I had someone who has been working with me for 2 years, and she just said, oh, I had no idea how confused I was and how confusing I was making it for other people to find me. And this is over several years of, checking back in, getting some support, but it is learning a new language about how to really help yourself be seen. Does that make sense?
Totally. Well, that totally reminds me of this experience with my mother. My mother's been passed away for many years now, but I remember my mother was really wild. She wore these wild colors, these wild clothes. And then one day a friend just said, oh, can I take you out shopping? And she put her in these sort of muted pinks and, tied her hair back. And everyone just said, oh my gosh, you look amazing.
Yes.
My mother was like, but that's not who I am. I'm this wild out there person. And what this other woman had seen was the softer part of her. And it brought this softer side of her personality out, and everybody really loved it. And she was really miffed by that, and that she couldn't see that in herself. But it's not that it takes someone else to see that, right?
You know what? I had a client very much like that who started out and she was already very successful. So one of the things is I will have clients come to me, or prospective clients, speakers, who just say, you know, their energy is like this, and they go, well, I already look great. I'm great. And I'm always just curious. I'm like, well, so that's great. You know, what could be different, or what are you looking for? What's coming next, you know, for you? And she's like, oh, I'm great. I've worked with 3 image consultants already. Like, I already know what I'm doing. And I said, well, that's wonderful. And she had an event coming up, and we just made some tweaks, because what I noticed was everything about her clothes got the attention, right? So it matched a very vibrant, lovely, vivacious personality. The clothes like doubled it. And so what it did was it created this like bubble that went out, and all you could see were the clothes.
Right.
And it was hard for people to see her. And some people really like push back. And sometimes all you get is that first try to, like, you know, read somebody. So people would just turn the other way and run, right? It didn't matter how great her message was, how amazing she was at the work she did. It didn't connect because it was too much. And what we discovered was quieting that down and letting the clothes just frame her allowed people to connect with that vibrancy of her.
Right. That's what happened with my mother.
Yeah.
I get it now.
And it feels boring to people who are used to being noticed for their clothes. They're like, oh, but people always tell me how great I look. And so when they're not getting that reinforcement of, oh, I love your outfit, it actually is just, oh, I love you and everything about you. What have you done? It feels different to them. It can. I mean, I totally know what you're talking about with your mom.
That's very profound. I really get that. So what's the biggest mistake speakers make in their presence that you've noticed that undermines the impact of their speaking? I know we've talked about a few.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we haven't touched on is one of the major mistakes they make is they just don't even know what they're broadcasting, right? So we're sending these messages and telegraphing things through our presence and the clothing we wear before we speak. And so when speakers don't know, when they're unaware, they lose control of their message, right? So one of the things I talked about was how I had a whole chapter of my life where I was using my clothes like armor and I didn't even know it. So I think of these as costumes that we unconsciously wear with our clothes. And so another one is an invisibility cloak. You know, it's really courageous to be a speaker, to put yourself out there. And I think to be a really effective speaker, you have to come out and be seen and not hide.
Yeah.
So there's things that I see speakers do and they don't even realize it, and they're hiding in plain sight. It's like being on stage and saying, don't see me, right?
Like what? What's an example?
Well, I see people do it through the styles of clothes they wear, right? It might be something kind of too big and baggy or flowy, and it just is like they just wish they could disappear behind it. Right. And how it can be received is like, oh, that person's really uncomfortable. They don't want to be seen, right?
Yeah.
They don't feel just, you know, loose and comfortable on stage. That other one is armor. That's another mistake, and people don't know they do it because sometimes it can feel to the speaker, oh, I'm very professional and I'm the expert. I'm establishing that I'm the expert.
Right.
Well, I'd love to hear what you think about this, but I kind of feel like when you have a microphone in your hand or you're standing in front of a group, you're positioned as the expert.
Yeah.
They want your humanity. They want to connect with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I work with speakers, I was like, yeah, set both up, like ability and credibility. Speakers that are like all vulnerability and people don't respect them, and then there's some that are all credibility and people just think they're sort of this,
Yes, I see it as a spectrum. There's like this there's this A to E spectrum, and A is approachable, and that's that open and vulnerable, but people like you, but they may not respect you
yeah,
because you haven't established that credibility and that expertise. And on the other end is showing up all the way as an expert, but there's no humanity. The person isn't in there. And so you need to find that space where you're the expert with your humanity.
yeah. So it's a tricky razor's edge to sort of bring those two together, and that's one of the biggest things I find people have to go on as an inner journey as well as an outer journey as a speaker. Because of course I deal with a lot of the psychological aspects. I find that's about 80% of my work. You probably do too, Catherine, in terms of up and being your best self. It's 80%. What's going on in here?
There's a lot of roadblocks about being seen and what it's like to be seen, and how we don't even know, the things that we're doing to keep ourselves safe, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that's why I love this work, but it happens to be, there's a very tangible thing we have to deal with, which is, how do we look? What do we put on our bodies?
Yeah, and not only for public speaking in front of a big group, but even if you're going to sit down and have a one-to-one with someone who might, if you're in network marketing, join your team, or if they could be a long-term consulting client, they're taking it all into what you're wearing and how you're showing up. So it's
Absolutely.
good,
Yeah.
not just for speakers.
No, it's not just on a stage. I mean, I see speaking and being a speaker means anytime you're interacting and connecting and you want influence, you want to build relationship. I worked with a team of network marketers because the woman who was leading this team really wanted to support them to go out and be able to have those conversations, because as they started out, they had so much trepidation around one, building their own credibility, what it was like to be seen, and have those conversations. And so I was very intentional about what I put on just for this conversation, because I could have worn something that in terms of color was like very energetic and bright and but I felt like that didn't fit the context of a one-on-one conversation, right? I really want to be present and have you feel like, here I am, open, and we can just relate and have a really honest conversation. So when people are thinking about the context, it's really important that the choices you make feel appropriate for that context of what's your goal for that meeting? How do you want the person that you're interacting with to feel? What qualities do you want them to experience about you? And can you let those flow?
Right, exactly. Yeah, you don't want that mismatch.
Yeah, I mean, I had a client who would always come in and she'd be like, I love this color. People tell me when I wear this color, it's the best. And it was so bright and overpowering, and it didn't actually suit her.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people just felt like bowled over, like they'd been bulldozed in her presence, because it was hard to feel like you couldn't connect with her in a really one-to-one way. In front of a group, maybe that would have been more appropriate. Right. Because that color would have matched the energy or the size of the room. But when you're in smaller group meetings or one-to-one, you want to be really mindful,
Yeah. And you don't want to be completely dressed differently, because then you have to spend a lot of time kind of bridging that.
Yeah. What do you tell your audiences when they're asking about that? If they're really thinking about their audience, what can they do to position themselves as that expert with humanity, knowing their audience?
Well, I remember the common wisdom for years was always find out how everyone else will be dressed and dress one notch above.
Mm-hmm.
And, that can work. Like if they say business casual, so then you're wearing, nice slacks and a nice blouse. You wouldn't be high heels and dress, or if you're a guy, you wouldn't be in a tuxedo.
Right.
So that's one rule of thumb, but you probably have, a more complex answer for that.
I really encourage people to have that inward connection, to understand when they feel most connected to themselves and get to that why. Like sometimes if people have a specific outfit they really love and they're like, I just feel myself, even if it's something they just, wear at home or with their family, I dig deeper to say like, okay, so why is that? What is it that you like about that? How do you feel when you're in that outfit? How do we replicate that in other scenarios, right? So think of yourself like a dial. You want to be able to go to any kind of event or meeting and you turn that dial and it's always you. You're not suiting up into some persona to fit them, because then people are going to feel that disconnect. What do I want to be communicating about myself? Give themselves a compass, because that way when they go, when you go into your closet, you actually have a framework that you're giving, so that's one of the very first exercises I'll do with a speaker, is just say, okay, what is it you want to be moving towards? What are the qualities you want to be showing up with? And then they can start to when they put their clothes on their body, they think, oh no, this doesn't make me feel that way, right? So if something is, confident in the, an expert, and also, I'm trying to think of something a client has said recently. More playful, right? They want to feel lighter. They came from a very serious background. It felt like they were always about like, I know how to execute and be the business person, but I actually want to bring more of myself forward. So there needed to be a lightness and a playfulness. Well, that doesn't mean the clothing needs to be silly, right? I wasn't like, okay, put on a bow tie and some big shoes and like show up. But I said, okay, so what are ways when you put things on your body, you feel that lightness, right? Because it's going to come from all of you. So again, the who you're being, what you're saying, and how you look, you need the clothing to help you show up relaxed and comfortable, that you're all that. You are the expert. You're also light. You also have a playful side. You don't want to stifle it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me, I had to do speaking engagement on Halloween, and they said everyone in the audience is going to be in costume. And I was talking about the power of laughter. And so I thought, I'll dress as a clown.
How was that?
Everyone's got weird
clowns.
I had no idea. They have like fear of clowns or something.
There's a word, my kids were just telling me, there's a word for the phobia, the fear of clowns.
I know. I had the worst disconnect with my audience ever. I mean, I just had this red nose, and I had the curly orange wig and the big shoes and big floppy, outfit. And I'm trying to do my workshop, and people were just like, it's the worst.
They were probably scared. They were scared.
So I get it totally. That's really good.
Well, so I gave a talk recently, and during a certain part of the talk, I put on fairy wings because I really wanted them to get that. I'm like, part of this is like, I'm like a fairy godmother who I come in and I help you transform, and it's, and it can be fun, right? There is a joy, and I'm someone who really loves a playful, silly side. And so I had those on just for a certain portion, and it helped people lean in and be like, oh, okay, this doesn't have to be a heavy, serious topic, because sometimes we get into the psychology of it and it feels, you know what, this is important, right?
Yeah.
It's creating space for all of it.
Yeah, totally. Sometimes costumes can be exactly what would, totally.
Right. So it's that intention, right?
All the intention, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd love people to know how they can get more info from you. Katherine has a really great free download that you can get called The 5 Keys to Authentically Elevate Your Speaker Presence. And it's really great. So one sheet, and it's really useful tips that I found very eye-opening, and I'd love you to get a copy. And you'll see a link below for how to get that. It's Katherine-Johnson.com speaker presence if you're just listening. So it's Katherine with a K -Johnson katherine.com/speaker presence, and you can get the free download. So anything else you want to say about that, and anything else you offer that would help people take a further journey with this?
Yeah, I'm happy that anyone who wants to learn more, go to that gift, because I think it is really valuable. It gives people a couple things to really think about that might be a different perspective than they've ever heard around image consulting and how to think about getting dressed and really showing up in the world to be seen. So I think that's a really great start. And then in addition to that, if someone wants to follow up, I work with people all over the world. So I have virtual sessions that I use to support people, and then workshops and training. So people can look on my website, which is katherine-johnson.com, to learn more, because I do group programs as well as individual work. So it just depends on someone's level of support, what they could use to really enhance their speaker presence. And I love what I do. So if there's something I can do to help, I love to hear what people are looking for.
Yeah, and I've seen Katherine's, Katherine's clients, some of her before and afters, and they're really amazing. They're just like, oh, it makes people, I want that, right? So
there's usually some gasping involved from the audience when there's from a before to after.
Yeah, so if you'd love someone to take you along on that journey, Katherine's your person. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for inviting me, Carla. This was really, really fun.
Okay. Until next time.
Okay, bye.